understand. I totally get that. I don't eat meat. My protein largely is beans or things based on beans. Speaking of which, did anybody try the Korean barbecue wrap yesterday? That is my favorite. That is my favorite thing. I love it very, very much. So I promised today that I would talk to you a little bit about the Choose Your Own Adventure project. So this is an example of some of the Choose Your Own Adventure books. So this particular one is about the fight or flight response. So what you're supposed to do is you are supposed to illustrate. They picked something based on The Purge, as you can see. And I remember this project very, very well because when it came in, it still smelled like Sharpie. And I think it took 2 years before it didn't. So basically, they've kind of set up a purge situation, and basically you have to stay or leave, and then based on the option that you pick, there's another option. So you'll kind of notice, by the way, these illustrations, they're okay, but they're not like great masters of painting great. So I want to be really clear. I am grading you on your creativity. I am not grading you on the quality of your art. This is a critical thinking project. This is not an art project. So do kind of keep that in mind. Now, something that I want to show to you really quickly, I did put up the rubric for the assignment. It is 75 points. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that really quick, and then we'll get finished up talking about sensation and perception. Oh my gosh, that's huge. There we go. That's better. It freaks me out when it's that big.
But I'm not the only one.
Oh no, like if you accidentally press a key, it'll just start getting larger. I'm like, no.
Kind of just does it.
Okay. So here are the instructions, and I also included the rubric with which I use to grade this. So let me go ahead and pull that up, and I'll talk a little bit about it. So the goal of this project is to apply your knowledge to basically show how different psychological concepts operate in the real world. This is about the fight or flight response, for example. I have cases in my office about different ways to study for tests. And based on what you choose, you either get an A, a C, or an F as a final outcome. I have ones, a really popular one is parenting styles. There are other really good ones I've seen on classical conditioning and operant conditioning. So you're going to work in groups of 3 or 4. I did up that to 5. So you can have max of 5. And you're going to make a choose your own adventure book. It needs to be about whatever psychological concept you would like. You need to come up with a good story and illustrate it. These books will be presented out at the academic showcase on the 14th. Now, you can opt to not have your book be shown at the academic showcase. It will not affect your grade. So you are allowed to say, I don't want anybody else to see this, and it won't affect your grade. So there are a couple of links that I have for Choose Your Own Adventure with a basic idea of how it works if you've never seen it before. So here are some requirements that you absolutely must have for your book. 8 pages in length. You need at least 5 different choices that need to be made. On the final page of the book, please include what concept your book illustrates and how you chose to do that. And you need to meet with me or email me by October 10th. So I'm giving you a lot of leeway because I forgot to mention it in the syllabus to make sure that you're on the right track. You don't have to have a fully fleshed out idea by October 10th. You just need to say, this is my group, this is what we're doing. You are welcome to meet with me at any point if you're having trouble making this book what you want it to be, or if you need some assistance, I'm happy to help. So this is due by class on Monday, November 14th. It will, this is the one instance where it will get points off if it's late. This is one of the few instances. The academic showcase, I picked the wrong dates. That should be the 14th to the 18th. Books will be presented there. They will sit there. I won't grade them until after the showcase. So this is one of the times where it'll take more than a week for you to get your grade back. 20% of your group's project's grade will come from how well you contributed to the group, as well as the effort that you made. If you are working alone, I want a one-page write-up of how you think you did with the project and what you would have gonna sneeze, what you would have done differently. And then here you can see the rubric that I'm kind of looking for. So 40% of the grade comes from content, 40% comes from creativity. So it doesn't have to be good art. It just has to do a good job of illustrating the story, okay? Does anybody have any questions on that? Yeah, Aurora.
Do you have a list of the various psychological concepts that we can choose from?
You can choose any that you want.
Okay, so like if I do something with depression?
Yeah, that'd totally be fine. Anybody else? Any other questions? All right, well, that's good. So let me know if you do have any questions, and that'll be good. Hey, couple of other quick announcements before we begin. Please, please, please don't forget, if you have it posted in the forum, it's due tonight at 11:55. Send me some really cool optical illusions. I have already graded some that people have turned in. I plan to hit up the rest of you today. So those of you who have turned it in, but you haven't gotten a grade yet, I will grade those today. And then your quiz posted this morning. It is on sensation and perception. So make sure that you get that done by Monday. All right. Any other questions? All right, I will try not to sniffle too much. I took an antihistamine last night, so I don't know why I am doing this. I might quickly go and blow my nose if I need to from some paper towels next door. Okay, so the last time that we were here, we were talking about different types of depth cues, and we finished up with this weird painting by Renee Magritte. So this is a case of interposition, and this is actually playing with interposition. So interposition is basically the idea that objects that are closer to us block objects that are farther away. So right now, if you're looking at me from the perspective of class, you can't really see much of the lower half of my body. And that's because it is being blocked by the podium, which is closer to you than I am. Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. I occasionally have students get upset in my office and they cry, and I always am like, oh my gosh, I have tissues. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have tissues. So then I feel really bad. I'm like, can I go run to the bathroom and get you some paper towels? Okay, well, thank you. Okay, so here's another example of interposition and how it works. So in this particular instance, you can see that the star is closest to you because it is blocking part of the pink rectangle. And then the pink rectangle is blocking the moon, which is the furthest away. Now, some people, if they're really smart alecky, will tell me that the black rectangle is the furthest away because everything else is blocking it. And that is also true. Everybody good? Okay. So another monocular cue is something called relative height. So generally, objects that are higher up in our view are judged to be farther away. So for example, in this image, you can kind of see it has the creation that this is a mountain kind of on the horizon, and we're going to judge that as being farther away. All right. Anybody needs some more time here? Okay. So maybe you've had an instance of this when you are driving in a vehicle. So when you are in a car, objects that are closer to you, what you'll notice is that they will move faster to you and the opposite direction. So first of all, I would like to say, I do not, bless you, I do not encourage this with driving because your eyes should be focused on the road. But if you're a passenger in the vehicle, you might have had the experience of looking out of the window and seeing the lines on the road. What you're often going to notice is that they are going in the opposite direction as you are, and they're moving really quickly. So that's what you'll kind of notice if you're looking outside. Now, on the other hand, how many of you have had this happen where you look outside at night and it looks like the moon is following you? So objects that are farther away from us are actually going to move more slowly. And contrary to objects that are closer to us, those move in the opposite direction. Objects that are farther away appear to be moving in the same direction. This is what is called relative motion. It is also sometimes referred to as motion parallax. Right. Everybody good? Nope. Okay. Okay. Everybody good now? Okay. Oh, you're not carrying? Okay, that's fine. And remember too, if you miss some of these words, I know that I do give you a skeletal version of the notes, so feel free to look at those as well, even though they're not necessarily going to have everything on them, they have some things on them.
And page 147 in the textbook has all of these monocular cues and the
And picture.
diagrams.
Well, that's good. Well, yeah, these came from the book. It helps. It helps jog your memory. That's why I do it. Okay. So with linear perspective, this is a cue that is often used in art where we have parallel lines that often look like they are converging in the distance. The basic idea behind these is that the closer that these parallel lines look like they're about to touch, the further away that you can actually judge something. So this is one of those times where having annotate on Zoom is actually really helpful. So you can kind of see here, we've got some parallel lines. They look like they're, well, I just made them not parallel, but just go with it. But they look like they're not touching, but they look like they're getting closer to each other. So kind of the idea is that the more closely these lines appear to touch, and again, I'm sorry, my parallel is not very good. The more closely that these appear to touch at the end, the more they look like it's further away. Do the linear perspective.
They just did a linear perspective drawing where we basically had to draw a three-dimensional city block.
Oh, cool. Nice. Okay. So another monocular cue that we have are light and shadowing. So who here is really, really good with makeup? Like you do contour. Does anybody here, like, I know that contouring is out, but does anybody remember when we were all doing contouring and stuff like that? Well, some people still do it. I always had a really hard time with it. But the idea behind things like contouring and makeup, highlighting and shadowing is to basically bring certain features out and have certain features kind of recede inward. So generally, dimmer objects are often perceived to be further away. Brighter objects appear to be closer. So you would put things like highlighter on your cheekbones as a way to kind of bring those out and make those features much more apparent. You use contouring to make some of those features appear further away as opposed to up close. Another thing that we used to do y'all remember like sandblasting on jeans where the center of the leg was considerably brighter than the rest of the leg? The idea behind sandblasting the center of those jeans, it used to be a lot worse in the early 2000s. Like it was like 2005, it was bad. You could not find any and remember, this is before the advent of skinny jeans. You could not find any pair of bootcut jeans that did not have like that bright stripe down the center of the leg. And the reason that they do that is to kind of bring that center out and make that leg look more shapely than it actually is. That's kind of the idea behind it. Also, I just really wanted to share that because I did not like that sandblasting and I hope it never comes back.
Well, how we keep bringing things back, it just
I know. Like you're wearing a choker that was very popular about 20 years ago, and it makes me feel so old. Okay. So one of the things that is kind of interesting is that in general, objects are going to change on your retina. Objects are going to change shape on your retina. Here is my phone, and as I turn it around, it is going to change its shape on your retina. Now, when my phone went like this to this, nobody here seems to be freaking out going, oh my gosh, Dr. Gilchrist, you're a magician. You just made that change shape. You know that even when something changes shape on your retina, that it's still the same object. This is what is referred to as perceptual constancy. We perceive objects as being unchanging even when lighting conditions change, when their illumination changes, as well as their image on our retina. And this occurs for shape, this occurs for color, and this occurs for size. Yes.
How does this intersect with object permanence, if at all? Like, is there a stage where we develop perceptual constancy, or is that more innate?
I feel like they're different things slightly, but I'm not actually sure when perceptual constancy is achieved. I can look some stuff up and see what I find out. So here's kind of another example. This door is rapidly opening. As it opens, it changes its shape, but you still perceive it as a door. So in about a month, and I'm not going to enjoy this, it's going to start getting dark at 5 o'clock. Boo. So one of the things you're going to notice, how many of you have a car out in the parking lot right now? After 5, you're still going to be able to find your car in the parking lot, even when it's dark. Nobody goes, oh my gosh, somebody stole my car and they replaced it with a car that looks exactly the same, but a slightly different color. Like, you know that it's still the same color, even when the lighting conditions change. So we have this sense of constancy. So size constancy, this is one of those fun little tricks. These look like they are different in size. They are not. It's just that we have manipulated some of the depth and distance cues to make point B look like it's smaller than point A. So if something looks smaller to us, what we will typically find is that we're going to use our depth cues to make sure that we know that the size isn't changing. So my folks in the back row, all of you are very, very small on my retina compared to the people in the front row. That does not mean I think that you suddenly shrank. I have different depth cues that tell me that the reason that you appear smaller on my retina is because you are farther away. Be one of those days. We're gonna need some fuel. All right, everybody good? Okay, so here's a case of color constancy. So some of you might actually be kind of surprised by this because one of the things that I've mentioned is that your perception of a color depends on the light waves that are reflected off of an object. That is what your perception of color is. So you might think that if the lighting conditions change, that's going to change how much light is reflected off of the object, and thus your experience of a color is going to change. But the truth of the matter is, when I change these lighting conditions, the apples still look green. And that's because even though the lighting conditions have changed, maybe there's less light to go around or there's more light to go around, the same ratio of cones is always going to be activated. That ratio will be the same even when the lighting conditions change. So that's part of the reason why the dress, and you know what dress I'm talking about, you know what dress, that dress was such a big deal because there are very few times where you and I can look at the same object and get a completely different perception. And part of the reason why there was that difficulty was because that picture had a lot of ambiguity. There was ambiguity about the light source, where it was coming from. And additionally, you and I each have our individual cutoffs for where one color ends and another begins. Additionally, there was some evidence that people who looked at the dress on monitors or screens that had people who were exposed more to blue lighting, AKA looking at your screen, had an easier time seeing the dress as black and blue compared to people who looked at the dress under yellow lighting, which would be things like sunlight and a good majority of our light bulbs. And because of that, you started to kind of get those differences as well. All right, so you want to see a couple of fun illusions that play with color constancy? Check this out. So this, now I get that this glows and it's a little bit complicated. These look different in color, but they're actually the same. Here's everybody's favorite. I first saw this when I was in college. Okay, so A and B look like they are different shades of gray, correct?
Yes.
They're not. Okay, let me explain what's going on here. I'll try to give you the Clips Notes version. Yeah, Luca, you want to know? It's okay. So this cylinder is casting a shadow, right? So the truth of the matter is that both of these are the same color, but because B is under the shadow and A isn't, you actually discount part of that shading as being part of the shadow. So that creates the perception that B is actually lighter when it isn't. Yeah.
I'm assuming it is also aided by the fact that it's on a checkerboard pattern and we have preconceived
Yeah.
expectations about how checkerboards work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But one of the things that you can do if you still don't believe me, if you believe that I'm trying to trick you, you can take this picture, you can put it into Microsoft Paint, you can use a color dropper to see like the different shades of gray, and you will find that they are in fact same. Okay, so here are some fun examples of shape and size constancy. These two monsters are actually the same size, but we played with these distance cues to make the monster in the background look larger. And the same is true for this farm picture. And one of the things that I will also kind of mention is that context really matters when we are judging size and distance. So what you are looking at here, I'm going to put this on annotate so you can write this down if you are so inclined. This is called the Mueller liar illusion. So the Mueller liar illusion is basically, if I am looking at these two arrows, this line appears to be longer in length than this line, despite the fact that they are the exact same length, but the flanking arrows make this one look longer than it is. Now, what's interesting is that people, depending on where you come from, depending on what culture you're brought up in, and especially if you're a part of a culture that has houses that have a lot of corners and 90-degree angles and things like that, you are going to be more likely to fall for this than if you live in a culture that emphasizes circular housing like yurts, for example. So culture actually does matter. We think that when we're looking at these different perceptions and these different illusions, that oftentimes what we're going to find is that everybody's the same. And it turns out that everybody is not the same. I actually share with my research methods class that there are differences between Americans and Japanese participants looking at figure ground segregation. And that feels like something that we should all do equally and do the same way. And that's not true. Yeah, Kenna.
Is that kind of like how, I guess this is just another example of it, but have you ever heard of the thing with like, the boba and kiki shapes?
Yes.
Where you have to name, there are two shapes, and you have to name one boba and the other one kiki.
And it's usually
And
the round
there's
ones are
a fluffy
boba.
one and a spiky one,
Mhm.
and everyone names, most people like, especially if you speak like English or whatever you name, most people will instinctively name the spiky one Kiki and a round one Boba, because that just makes sense to us. But like if someone spoke a different language where they don't have the same like,
Oh yeah.
you know, pronunciation or whatever,
Uh-huh.
they wouldn't do that.
That's actually really interesting that you mentioned that. We talk about that in my cognitive psych class, and I actually share a paper with the students. The Boba Kiki effect not only works for shapes, it works for faces too. So we expect somebody named Bob to have like a rounder face with rounder features, and we expect somebody with a shorter sounding name like Kirk to have sharper features and like a thinner face. Kind of interesting. So the Boba Kiki effect not only works for shapes, but it works for names and faces. And what's interesting is that we like faces more. We like people more when their name, actually the sound of their name matches their face. So now you're like, curse my parents for naming me with something that has lots of long sounds, like I have sharp facial features and my name is Amanda. Lots of long sounding words. And well, the only thing that feels really big is my nose, maybe my chin. All right. All right, let me get rid of this annotate.
It's like a round name or an angular name.
Well, my sister's the opposite. Her name is Ashley. She has rounder facial features than me. I feel like we should switch faces. Yeah, Cora.
Honestly, it just makes me curious because I mess with naming systems all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about that going, have I done this? Or not entirely sure, because I don't name people, I name creatures.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know if, does that cross the plot? I don't know.
So,
I mean, it applies to blobs.
well, I was gonna say this for those of you that occasionally worry about being liked by everybody, take heart. Sometimes people just aren't gonna like you because your name doesn't match your face. And folks, there's nothing you can do about that. So don't worry about what everybody thinks of you, because people will choose not to like you for silly reasons. Yes, exactly. Take heart. Okay. So I'm going to show you a really fun illusion really quick. So I am going to pause this and I am going to stop share or pause recording because I'm pretty sure this is an old commercial and yeah, copyright. All right.
To a science center out of town.
Oh yeah, no, St. Louis, the St. Louis Science Center has this too.
There was also.
Aurora?
That reminds me a lot, there are a lot of recent advertisements for, I think, apartments.com, and it has Jeff Goldblum in it, and they play with those size distance things.
Uh-huh.
Because, you know, oh, you can find more space, and he, you know.
Uh-huh.
Out and the illusion comes back.
Yeah, it's also in the opening of the Temple Grandin movie. This is famously referred to as an Ames Room. So the Ames Room, so the idea behind the Ames Room is that you are basically given the perception that the room that you're in is a perfect square, but it turns out it actually is something like this. The room is angled away and it's also sloping downward a little bit, but it's given the perception that it is a basic ordinary room. And for those of you that are watching the recording, here's what the room is actually kind of shaped like. It is also viewed through a tiny little aperture, and that reduces some of the spatial cues that you would use to say, hey, there's something not quite right about this room.
And just like in this one, there's a lot of times like they don't overdo it, but they very deliberately put in certain props. They left the checker board,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
also like a lot of them I've seen a clock on the wall, but it's like a freakishly large clock, but they put it in that further away part to make it look like a normal clock.
We already talked about this slide, so I'm going to skip it. So I do want to talk a little bit about our other senses, but we spent most of our time talking about vision because, folks, vision is our most used sense. Now, one of the things about vision that I want to share with you is that vision has a tendency to override our experience of our other senses. So here's kind of an example. Earlier in class, when I was playing bad lip reading with Axe Assassin Albertson, where did you perceive the sound as coming from? The lips. Okay, so oftentimes I caught that. Where is the sound actually coming from? Coming from the speakers, both here and up near the projector. This is what is referred to as the ventriloquist illusion. Oftentimes when we are watching something on our phones or our laptops, or when we go to the movie theater, sound is actually coming from the speakers. However, we will often perceive the sound as coming from the characters' mouths, even though that is not physically possible. So our visual senses inform how we perceive other senses. Yeah, Kenna.
I don't know, this is like, since we're almost done with this isn't exactly related to this thing specifically, but since we're almost done with the vision section, how does this, do you know how, like, the vertigo effect with filming works, or is that like more of a filming thing?
That is more of a filming thing in that case. And unfortunately, I know very little about film. Okay. So now we are done talking about vision. Now we are talking about hearing. After vision, hearing is our second most used sense. And hearing happens because when you are speaking, your vocal cords are basically producing sound that creates changes in air pressure through sound waves. So for you to be able to create a sound, molecular collisions need to occur. So sound waves are going to create changes in air pressure. And those sound waves are basically different combinations of sine waves like these. Now, when we're talking about sound waves, all sound waves have a couple of different properties that basically correspond to how we perceive different aspects of a sound. So if you've had physics, you've probably talked a little bit about the amplitude of the wave. That is how high or how low the peak of that particular wave is. So quieter sounds tend to have a lower amplitude. Louder sounds tend to have a higher amplitude. When we talk about the pitch of a sound, pitch is our perception of a sound's frequency. So frequency is how many times the cycle basically revolves and goes from positive to negative back to positive. So something that is low in pitch has a low frequency, such as this one. Something that is higher pitched is going to have a higher frequency. We see more of those cycles in the same period of time. We measure frequency in hertz, Hz, which is basically the number of cycles per second. So something that is 60 hertz would be 60 cycles per second. Something that is 400 hertz would be 400 cycles per second. Thanks for sticking it out. We've only got 10 minutes left. We will finish up our senses on Monday, and I really want to push. So if you have any questions, get them to me by email on Monday or wait until after class because I want to get through sensation. You may not believe it, but our second exam is coming up quicker than you think. And we do actually need to talk about learning and conditioning and memory before that test pops up. Yeah.
When is our next test?
October 19th. So I'm going to start writing it next week. Study guide will go out the 12th. I'm always thinking ahead. All right. Everybody good? Okay. So I'm going to stay on this slide for a little bit, but I want to talk just a little bit about the major parts of the ear and how hearing works. Now, when most people think about their ears, they think about this portion right here, but really that is just your outer ear. This is the portion of your ear that is called the pinna. It is the job of the pinna to funnel in sound. So something that's kind of interesting is that if you kind of feel around your pinna, and I would encourage you to do so, don't stick your finger in there, but like feel around the different grooves of your ear. Every single one of you has a unique ear shape with different grooves, and those are specific to you to help you localize sound. So every single one of you, because you have unique ears in relationship to your height, every single one of you has a unique way to basically figure out where sounds are in the environment. Yeah.
So would they be kind of like fingerprints?
Well, I mean, there's only so many different grooves that your ear can have. So I don't think they would, I think you're going to see a lot of similarities in comparison to fingerprints, but they are unique, but probably not as unique as fingerprints. Okay. So sound waves cause changes in air pressure. This is going to lead to different molecular collisions, which are critical for hearing sound. And so sound is going to be funneled in by the pinna, our outer ear. It's going to travel into our ear canal, and it's going to cause vibration against your eardrum. Your eardrum is also referred to as a tympanic membrane. So I'll go ahead and annotate that if you like technical terms. So get it? It's an eardrum, tympanic membrane, like a timpani. Yeah. Okay. But the idea is, so the eardrum is basically a small little membrane made of skin. It can regenerate if it is damaged. Those of you who have ever ruptured your eardrum know that it's gonna hurt. It will not be fun, but your eardrum can repair itself. So the idea is that these sound waves cause vibrations. That's gonna cause the eardrum to vibrate. Now, that's the eardrum is basically the end of your outer ear. Now we're kind of moving into the middle ear. Yes,
That's tympanic membrane.
eardrum. That's your eardrum. Okay. So now we're in the middle ear. Now, if you take a look behind the eardrum, there are 3 tiny little bones. And so those are called, you can write this down, they're called the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. Those are not their technical names, but we also call them this based on what they look like. So here's the hammer. Then we have the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. We'll get there. So we have the hammer, the anvil, and you can see that that looks just like a stirrup. So something that's kind of interesting. How many of you have played Marco Polo with your friends in the pool? So the idea is somebody is outside of the pool and or somebody is in the pool trying to find you. Now, how many of you have ducked underwater as you're doing it? Can you hear sound well when you're underwater? No. Here's why it's harder. So anytime that you're switching from air into fluid, a sound wave is going to lose some of its intensity because you're changing mediums. You're going from a medium where molecules are very free to move about. You're in air, and then you're moving into liquid where the molecules are not moving as freely. And so that takes away some of the intensity of the sound. So here's why I bring this up. Your inner ear is filled with fluid. Your outer ear has air. So what's going to happen is that we're going to transfer that sound from the air of the outer ear to the fluid of the inner ear, which means we might lose some intensity. The bones of the middle ear are designed to amplify the sound so that when they go from the outer ear into the middle ear, they don't lose their intensity. So those little bones are designed to amplify the sound so that they don't lose intensity when they move into the inner ear. Kind of cool, huh? So these are basically going to pump like a little piston. So they're attached to the eardrum. So every time the eardrum moves, those bones move. And so you can see that the stirrup is attached to this little structure here. This is called the cochlea. Now the cochlea is coiled up. It is bone. It is made of bone. Inside of the cochlea are where our sensory receptors for hearing are. And do you want to know what wonderful name we gave these? So we've had rods, we've had cones. Are you ready for this? They're called hair cells. Classy. They're called hair cells.
Explanation of this word, I did not think would bother me, but something about it puts a weird image in my head that I don't.
Well, it's because they are cells with little tiny cilia sticking out.
And there's like, that's cool. I've seen like diagrams of the ear before, but I just don't like the name.
And that's okay. So the idea is the stapes is going to pump based on the vibrations of the eardrum. That's going to cause the fluid in the cochlea to move, which causes those hair cells to move. And it's the movement of the hair cells that allows us to hear sound. That information is going to be carried to the auditory nerve, and it's going to go to the thalamus and then to the primary auditory cortex in the brain, in the temporal lobes. That's a basic idea of how sound happens. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
Oh, here's my question. is the anatomy of the ear going to be on the test, you think? Is that a common?
I think you should know what hair cells are. You should probably know what the cochlea is, and you should probably know, the bones.
I can do that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you can call, I'm gonna probably call them hammer, anvil, and stirrup. Okay, so one of the things that's kind of nice about our ears in comparison to our eyes. So with our eyes, they're kind of located in the same roughly approximate spot. Our ears are different. They are 180 degrees from each other. So that actually makes it really helpful for us, because if something makes a sound over to my right, it is going to hit this ear faster, and it's also going to be a little bit louder. And because of that, it's actually really easy for us to locate sounds that are really, really preferring one ear over the other. So I can locate a sound easily if it's over here. I can locate a sound easily if it's over here. If it's in the center of my head, it is suddenly a problem because it is equal distance to both of my ears. So sounds that are centrally located are going to be harder for us than sounds that prefer one ear over the other. I would do a demonstration, but I think we'll start class with that because we're almost out of time. We're going to finish this up on Monday, and we are going to talk about learning and conditioning. So if you have any questions on sensation and perception, I am going to ask on Monday that you wait until the end of class to ask me, okay? Because we got to get through this, y'all. We don't have class next Friday, so we got to push. All right. Have a wonderful weekend. I will see you next time. Yes.
This is just like a fun fact, but owls